Welcome everyone. Welcome to this week's edition to the SAP Fiori-side chat. We are very excited to have you join us today. My name is Eugen Winchell and I'm from the SAP UX product management team. And today I'm joined by my co-host Keith Fisher. Good morning, Keith.
Good morning, Eugen.
And today's topic for the Fiori-side chat is one that has been requested a lot by you. It's embedded analytics and SAP Analytics Cloud and how to use both properly. And for that, we have invited an awesome round of experts from the extended SAP family for a panel discussion. In today's round, we have SAP colleagues and a partner/customer from the SAP App House network who have worked on the analytics topic for many, many years and have a lot to share. Today, we have with us Sean Sivertson, Steve Bickerton, Javier Baltazar, and Chris Vozella. Welcome, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Greetings.
Morning. And to make it truly interactive as usual, we invite all of you to ask questions and comment during our chat. And before we get started, we wanted to set just a few ground rules and over to Keith for that.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm really excited about this session. You have all the people and your participants there and as we move forward. So yeah, just the ground rules as we always are, right? Our focus is on SAP UX and UX related topics. We promise to not be selling you anything. We're not collecting any information. And so therefore you feel free to share your name, introduce yourself into the chat window. We'll talk about that in a moment. So we are part of a larger ecosystem. We have partners, as you know, internal and external people. Please refrain from trying to promote third-party services or tools that aren't related to the conversation at hand. And as I mentioned before, virtual introductions. So if you're not familiar with Zoom, at the bottom of the window is a chat window. And you can go ahead and click on that and open it. And you can actually send your name and introduction to everybody out there. And we'd be happy to know who you are so we can follow up and if any questions further arise. You have video and microphone settings there on the bottom right. If you are interested in asking a question live, which we'd love to have, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll promote you to speak and or be on video if you would like. And in the meantime, make sure that you're on mute on the audio button. And this is an informal conversation, but it is recorded, right? We will keep things professional and hopefully have a little fun doing this. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and turn this over to our panelists. So first of all, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. Go ahead and start, Sean.
You bet. Good morning. I'm Sean. I'm with Convergent IS. We're both an SAP customer. We've been running our company on S4 since 2015. And part of our business also involves helping other folks with what they're trying to do on SAP, especially making it easy to use. As Keith mentioned, we're an app house.
That's great. Welcome, Sean, and welcome back, Javier. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Javier Baltazar. I'm part of the regional implementation group for S4HANA. And I think I know something related to analytics, so I'll try to do my best to support you with the questions.
Great. Thank you, Javier. And Steve, welcome to this chat.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Steve Bickerton. I'm in the North American Analytics COE, and I've been in the analytics space since the late 90s. So pleasure to be here, folks.
Yeah, welcome. And Christopher, please introduce yourself and welcome to the chat.
Thank you. Happy to be here. So Christopher Vozella, I'm an executive advisor in the SAP Chief Customer Office, specifically on the S4HANA Ambassador Program. So we work with a lot of customers to get them live and happy with solid programs in the S4 world. So thank you for letting me join.
Happy to have you. And so with that, one more moment here before we kick off the questions. So there is a button also at the bottom of your screen there that while the poll is coming up and we'll speak to, is for asking questions. So there's Q&A button there that's somewhere along the bottom. And if you are interested in asking a question, go ahead and put it there and we'll facilitate making sure that the speakers get a chance to answer your questions live, or we'll follow up with them, after the fact if necessary.
Great, and while the poll is going, maybe let's start with the panel discussion. First question to Sean. Sean, as you mentioned, you are actually in a very unique position. So you're an SAP partner and SAP customer at the same time. So could you actually share what your recent experience has been?
Sure. I guess going back to 2015 when we implemented S4 for ourselves, it's a pretty small world because Javier was one of the folks from the SAP team that helped us, I'll say, iron out some of those early adopter issues. So that was very, very much appreciated, and it's pretty fun to get back together here several years later, 5 years later, and see how far the product has come and things like that. So what I can do is I can share my screen. I wanted to just talk about some of the highlights of the difference between the embedded analytics and SAC. We've been able to take advantage of the embedded analytics for quite a few years, and obviously those are fantastic. The semantic tags that were introduced with 1709 really added a dash of magic to helping unlock what you would imagine would be easier, but had been something really time consuming to go and get some of those KPIs. So that's a fantastic addition. So super excited about that. And I can also talk about SAC, because we also have both SAP and non-SAP data. And as we were looking to keep an eye on the SAC product as it was growing and maturing, certainly in the last year, it's grown and matured enough that we bought that for ourselves as well. And we're pretty familiar with it, so it didn't take us very long to get it up and rolling. But I wanted to just show you maybe a little bit of the difference. If that's okay, I can show a quick demo. Full disclosure, this is our dev system. This is not real data, but this is the example of one of the KPIs. We've got a shorter time horizon here because our dev system was copied back from production earlier. So I've only done a few months here, but this KPI is something that you can create pretty quickly as a trend line just using embedded analytics. So if you think about somebody that's interested in EBITDA or some of those other metrics, whether it's return on assets, or you're looking at EBIT instead of EBITDA, or you're looking at gross revenue, gross margin, gross profit, it's a whole pile of quick KPIs that are there just out of the box. And so once you've applied your financial statement tags to your financial statement version, those semantic tags let you very, very quickly calculate these things. So you can say, here's my EBITDA, and you can put this KPI on your smartphone. So now your executive, your business leader, whoever they are, they've got their smartphone and they want to know what that is. They just pull out their phone and away you go. So now you've got that. So obviously I love that. And so this is the kind of thing that's been good for us for the last few years. What we started getting into is, as we're watching the SAC product, the maturity of the product is something that we've been keeping an eye on. And it's been, I suppose, the last year that, at least in our view, it's tipped the point where we'll jump into it. So leading by example has always been super important to me. So that idea of when it's, before we can, get up and say that we really like something and we want to be able to use it ourselves and see value in it. So this sort of embedded analytics here, you can click into it, and the ability to go and very quickly see on a time dimension what the EBITDA has been for your organization. And then you can go in and use your wonderful little gear to go and add some other dimensions and things like that for any of us that are in there. You can add some other measures if you really wanted to get into that. You can save that. You can make it a tile on your desktop. So these are the kinds of things that you think about and you go, holy smokes, that's there. I didn't know it was there. So the embedded analytics goes a really, really long way. And we've been a big fan of that for a long time, and I continue to be. The ALP page, you can go into the embedded analytics, and this is where on the embedded side, there's something that SAC does just naturally, and that the embedded analytics does something that's kind of upside down. Anybody in the accounting space knows if you go into the financial statement, it'll show you revenue as a negative number, which if you're not an accountant and you don't know why, like me, then it throws you off every time. You're like, what? Where did it go? I thought this was a good thing. But when you see these little bar charts going down, you go, what's going on here? So there's a little bit of translation that's needed sometimes if you're going down that rabbit hole. In contrast, so you've got these different analytics, and you can go across a whole bunch of different ones. These are just some of the examples from our dev system here. But in contrast, in SAC, you have the same KPI. You've got the same view into the HANA database as a live connection. And so you can very quickly go and bring these up, and then you've got a lot more flexibility in terms of how you rearrange things, how you organize things. So you can take one of these charts and you can start to move it around. So if you want to move things around, you've got so much more flexibility to go and lay things out. But almost more important than that is the ability to go and get things from non-SAP data sources, suck that in, and then stick it right next to it. So I think that the other piece on SAC that we're not talking about today, but it's around the planning side of it, and that's a big part of the maturity that we've seen in the last year. But that's just a super quick highlight of here's some things that I love in S4, and then here's some things that SAC has really come into its own in the last little while, and the maturity it's come a long way. I think that's a polite way to say it. A year ago, I wouldn't have bought it, but
sure. So Sean, maybe taking just a slight step back for some of our audience. So how long did it take you to actually go ahead and implement SAC on top of on top of your current systems?
Oh, right on. You know what? I almost forgot. This is a blog about the financial statement semantic tags. And so this blog here, we'll put into the chat in just a minute. If you are on S4 and you don't have these tags applied, seriously, get on it. It doesn't take very long. You get somebody who knows what your financial statement is saying, and knows the difference between return on assets and return on equity, and they're usually not too hard to find. And then you go and apply these financial statement tags. If we hadn't done that, it would have taken weeks. But because we had already done that, it took us from the time that our tenant was provisioned in SAC to get it wired up to dev and then production and then get some of our first dashboards up was about 3 days. So because of those financial statement tags, I mean, they're bloody genius because they make so many things go so much faster. It literally took days to go and get a whole bunch of those KPIs, and I just showed one of the KPIs. But 3 days.
Wow, pretty impressive. So just, maybe transitioning this to the rest of our audience. So 3 days sounds pretty fast for an SAC implementation. So is that kind of a common experience, Javier?
Well, I'd say it's about this much of it, but
yeah. But it's a hopeful sign. So I'm curious about, from our other panelists, what they've experienced in that first, blush of getting something up and running.
Yeah, in my experience with customers, it does take a lot of effort. I mean, you don't need that 2-year project to set up everything. It's, I'll say, between 1 to 2 weeks at the most. Here, you also need to consider the technical setup. So for example, this is a cloud solution. You need to ensure that your network has all the ports open, that there's no problems with your firewall. If you're going to use the cloud connector, if it's correctly set up.
Yeah.
But I mean, overall, I agree with Sean. It shouldn't take more than, to build a report from scratch with all the features, it shouldn't take more than 3 days.
Yeah. Another interesting thing, Javier, is that we also have a lot of pre-built content. So that, users can get started really quickly. And it's not, if you think of the pre-built content we've built in the past, it's much better than that. They're much more functional. And so S4, there's tons and tons of stuff for, whether it's on-prem or cloud. But you're right. I think the big thing is the cloud connector, getting the cloud connector set up. Once you've done that, you have live connectivity available. You deploy your content. You can enhance that content. You can get started very, very quickly. And there's a lot of predictive features as well, which is gives us augmented BI feel in SAC, which is a really nice bonus. So almost answering the next question for you, which is great. And a lot of those features work on live connectivity as well.
One of the other key pieces too that Sean highlighted, I just want to make sure everyone is kind of aware. So like Sean said, the semantic tagging available as of 1709. Because that's a really important question that a lot of our customers ask us is like, hey, I'm not on 1909 yet. How do I consume some of the innovation that's there in embedded analytics, Fiori, not being on the latest and greatest? And obviously, further down the line you get, the more innovations, the more predictive, the more available baked into S4 directly. But with 1709, we have capability, like Sean showcased, to use the semantic tags and greatly enhance the financial reporting. So there's a lot to take advantage of no matter where you're at. Later is better, but no matter where you are in the journey, you can still do some good stuff. So thanks, Sean, for highlighting it.
So I'm interested in, kind of the order and steps that people should be considering their implementations. So are they, if they're basically in the middle of an S4 transformation, an S4 upgrade, should they be thinking and planning for SAC to be kind of rolled out in parallel to getting all of their, Fiori and analytic applications going, or is there really a branch of consideration necessary for what we're going to do for analytics and how they get started?
If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to take that one. And I might have a slightly different opinion than some of the other panelists. When we look at big projects like launching S4, a lot of times we need to deliver value rather quickly. And if we kind of do it in a waterfall approach, like wait for S4 and then analytics comes 3 months after that, you run a risk with your users. There's no reason why, given that SAC can connect to third-party data sources and HANA, that you can't have a dashboard that does both, right? That's taking your old data from your other systems and combining that with S4 data. I've seen a lot of that. So there's a political piece here you have to consider around delivering value, right? The longer the project, the more risk you're going to have on that front.
So does it depend on the personas of the problem you're trying to solve first, right? I mean, one of our recommendations around Fiori implementation is to, pick somebody with a C level in their name and target, their needs first. And is that what will guide you here?
I think that's a fair assessment, yes.
Other opinions on that?
Yeah, we've seen that work over and over again. If you make somebody's life easier, where they used to have to go and hunt and peck for some information and it was hard to drill into, you make their life easier and you do it quickly, then people start to see that, hey, not everything that we have to do in here is, $1 million in 9 months.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the most important things for all of us to collectively shake off, because it makes such a big difference to be able to go and make something accessible off of something like this. And when you do that for one small slice, all of a sudden people can believe, because they don't right now often, they can believe that you can do that for more.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah, and this is Chris. I would say the big thing that from Steve's takeaway is you can't decouple the S4 from the Analytics Cloud. Get the wins with Analytics Cloud, connect to whatever data sources you have available, and then mainstream it back into the program and the project. That really is the key point that Steve was trying to enlighten was you don't have to bake it in a pure waterfall approach. Be agile, be prescriptive, have a plan, but get the wins early and then incorporate it into the larger project as you move forward, which is really the big key. And it's agile. You can do that.
Maybe coming to, because we just talked about SAP Analytics Cloud, maybe to Javier and Chris, how would you get started with S4 Analytics? So how would you do it with embedded analytics compared to SAC?
Well, what we've seen with most customers is that they first start with the standard analytics in S4HANA. So for example, there's some KPIs already available in the system that can give information of the daily sales outstanding, the material revenue recognition. And unfortunately, not everyone is aware of that. So what we've seen is that we start implementation probably from the early definition of the project. No one was aware of these capabilities of embedded analytics. So we need to dedicate at least a couple of days to explain the approach to the business, what you can get from this, explain what's available in the standard of SAP, because probably right now in ECC, you're building custom reports that you may no longer need when you go to S4. So we do this kind of exploration. Then we try to match it with what the business needs, what the end user requires. We do this definition of the persona, like Keith mentioned. We try to define this C-level persona or this analytic persona, because we also have multiple tools. Another big confusion with embedded analytics is that there's multiple tools. So when you go to the cloud, you only talk about SAC overall. I mean, there's a lot of tools also embedded into SAC, but the concept is SAC by default. With embedded analytics, you have the KPI designer or the KPI framework, the multi-dimensional reports. You also have Fiori configuration apps. So it's like a it appears to be a smaller word, but in reality, it's as big as SAC. So you also need to define some sort of strategy on when to use what. So probably the KPIs are pretty good for C-levels because they'll get a quick insight on the daily operations. But maybe for your analyst, this will not be enough. For that analyst, you may end up needing a combination of BW, embedded analytics, SAC, and even additional tools outside the scope of S/4HANA. So this part of the analysis is critical. And I'll say that customers need to try to identify this because unfortunately or fortunately, the way we delivered S/4HANA, we talk about embedded analytics, and it's so embedded in the system that we don't really mention this. And that's some of the challenges that we're facing right now, because when you go with a customer, you say that, hey, there's embedded analytics. Embedded what? Do I have that? Do I have to pay for an additional license? No, it's already included there. You only need to see it, take the most out of it. And if it doesn't match your needs, then you can start thinking on satellite solutions.
For sure. We've seen the same thing. I've called it sometimes one of the best kept secrets in S4. Yeah. All of those KPIs, the ability to put together reports, the ability to filter them, the ability to personalize them, they're there. And it's often glazed over. So taking some time for sure to explore that and to look at how you can use that. One of the other big differences is, and I think the analyst role is a great one, because there's the live pivot table across all the measures and dimensions that you can get right there in S4. But sometimes that's not quite enough, because you need to add some additional calculations, filters, and transformations to it. And that's something that can quickly put you into SAC as something that you're going to repeatedly do those things, and then you're going to bring it together with other data. So that, especially on the planning side, the planning, I think, is really the piece of SAC that is, getting your budgeting, your forecasting, your outlooks, and your adjustments, that kind of thing, and getting those. If you've seen those value driver trees where you can set something at 4% instead of 6% and see that flow through the rest of your model, those are the kinds of things that can put you into SAC really quickly. But the amount that you can do right there out of the box, it's actually kind of funny, because you think about an ERP system, and then you hear people say, but it's so hard to get data out of. Well, did you know that all of this stuff is right here? And then you show them that you've got this live pivot table right on S4 for, financials and, balances and all of these other things. And then all of a sudden they go, oh, wow, I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Right. So Chris, I'm interested, being a longtime BI reporting guy, right? You've heard a lot of the needs there. What's your experience here as people trying to figure out, what tools to really kind of pull together information, whether it's from data within S4? Is it based primarily on your role, or do you actually promote the idea that SAC and is the tool to use for line of business users who aren't necessarily in finance?
Yeah, it's a great question, Keith. I mean, overall, from an analytics approach standpoint, Javier said it best. You've got to have a plan, especially when you start from an S4 perspective at a program level, to have a plan for the analytics. You have to understand from an operational standpoint what you can get from S4 natively in terms of the operational parts. One of the pieces that if you don't mind me sharing from it, especially for customers who are existing ECC, using the Fiori apps recommendation report. That's something that Javier and team turned us on to. Very useful, very interesting, provides recommendations to customers on what Fiori apps would make sense. And that includes transactional Fiori apps as well as the analytics Fiori apps. So that's a very easy, fast way to get an idea of what you want to use from an overall S/4HANA analytic and Fiori standpoint. So that's a very good way to start. The big piece, though, is you have to have, from a business standpoint, Keith, you said it as well, understanding from the overall standpoint of identify the C-level folks that are going to be impacted. Target their needs first. One of the things we find very often is that the finance folks, finance has been one of the oldest and greatest pieces of ECC and S4 for years. So the Fiori apps, the approaches, the methodology, the semantic tags, all those pieces are very well, not to say embedded, but they're available. It's just a matter of, we sometimes from an SAP end, I think, have to get out of our own way. And like Sean said, we're not very good publicists in terms of some of the ways we've approached it. So one of the challenges I think and Steve can probably relate to this too, as an old analytics person, I think of consuming reporting and analytics, from the perspective of the business. You have a catalog of reports and analytics and dashboards that you need to run your business. And one of the things from SAP, and I think we need to do better, is really kind of put the information in a matrix where if I'm a finance person, don't make me hunt through the analytics library, show me the listing of the reports that I can do. If I'm a supply chain person, show me the listing of reports that are inherent and basic within S4 that I can do. So that's one thing that we're definitely working with Javier and the teams on to kind of restructure how we position it. Because there's a lot of great content there, but we don't always necessarily frame it in the best way for folks to consume it. But the big piece, make sure you use the tools like the apps recommendation report, the Spotlight apps, things like that, to give you an idea of where to start. Because a lot of it is very daunting to kind of walk into, but understanding where you start. And then from there, once you kind of figure out your operational needs, then that's where SAC in the larger reporting fashion comes in, where, hey, we're bringing together extended data from other sources. We want to fine tune or enhance, and it makes more sense to do it elsewhere. And that's where Analytics Cloud and folks like Steve are really great water carriers to help with that kind of stuff.
So I mean, and this is a great discussion because I think there is so much confusion. And being an old EPM guy, you touch my heart when you talking about financial reports, right? Because they're not just simply a standardized report you could pull up in a pivot table, right? So I'm interested here if we start from an S4 perspective, right? When we look at the analytic apps that are there, Javier, what can we do to help extend them, right? Do you have anything there to when people look at an analytic report and say, hey, I'm not quite sure what to do, what could, or this isn't quite enough. What do you tell them? Are there things that you show them? No.
Okay, so let me share my screen and I'll go through this quickly. It's a 15-minute video, but I won't go through it all the way. It's available via YouTube, so you can visit this. So what happens is that there's a new concept for extensibility. This is delivered by the S/4HANA framework. And probably what happens is that, again, we're not good at advertising stuff, so probably not everyone's aware of the features in S/4HANA extensibility. This is an example that we took from a real customer in the rig. Obviously, this is a demo system with dummy data, so that's what we used to build the video. But what the customer needed was to use probably one of the standard reports and add some filters. And by adding those filters, also they needed to define which fields were mandatory. Probably the standard definition does not fit your needs, but it doesn't mean that you need to rebuild the report from scratch. You can use the standard object in this case and probably create a copy of it. There's a new app included in the extensibility apps called Custom Analytical Queries. With this app, you can literally copy the entire CDS object and the entire query or the entire report. The tool does this for you via a wizard, so you don't need to worry about doing the development or adding additional stuff. Once the copy is done and you create this new object, you can then start customizing what's being displayed in the screen. You can go field by field, and maybe you want to hide all fields and just provide 2 inputs or 2 starting filters, or you can add as many filters or as many inputs as you want. By default, the CDS we built expose thousands of fields. So probably the field you want is already available in the standard CDS. It's just not visible. So what you need to do is probably use this app, do the changes, go saving your drafts, maybe add some additional filters, validate if the information is correct. And then in this case, you start modifying the multi-dimensional report. With this tool, you can also define which fields would be mandatory for that report. And again, you don't require anyone coding anything or any specific analytic knowledge to start building this. It's provided by you directly via the applications for customizing. Once you finish this, you can start seeing how the report looks. This is a multi-dimensional report. So you can see if the visualization is correct. If you want to change the visualization, probably the graph does not fit your needs, or you want to have more space for the table, you can do all these modifications here. And then once you're ready, you just simply publish the report. It becomes active in the system. You then create a custom tile in your Fiori Launchpad. And here is also where at least from a technical perspective, the part I like, because the configuration that you need in the target mapping and in the tile is minimal. So I'll jump quickly here. So we have a common launcher for the multidimensional reports in this case. So this is the endpoint for that URL for multidimensional reports. You can reuse it as many times as you want. The only parameter that you need to change is this one that's called xQuery. Here, you need to add the technical name of the report that you built. It will be the name of the structure related to the CDS view. All this is explained in the video if you want to go there. So you simply add it here, and that means that your tile is ready to go. You then assign this to a role, assign this to your users, probably add it to a custom catalog, and you're ready to go. This kind of modifications can be done in less than an hour, and you don't need a developer to do this for you. So that's one of the good things of this new extensibility approach, that it also includes analytics in S/4HANA.
Javier, that was very, very good overview. So the question from the audience for the whole panel: do you guys know of any great sources for videos like that in detail? Like Amola from the audience has actually asked, like, it's very helpful to have detailed videos. Do you know about any great sources, content creators that are actually very good in that space?
Yeah, I just shared our microsite for SAP Analytics Cloud. So it's quite easy. It's HTTPS sapanalytics.cloud. So it's, and it has everything that you'd want to know about the BI, the predictive, and the planning pieces of Analytics Cloud.
Great. Okay, then there is another question from the audience. If existing customers are utilizing the BW-based reports, if customers like to use embedded analytics reports, then can BW be decommissioned?
The one worry I would have is that you've used BW. If you're using BW for historical data, are you going to maintain that historical data in S4? So I think what you have to do is look at BW and make a business decision around that. If it has a lot of semantic value and you're using it, then you'll probably continue to use it. But if you're not, then S4 would make a lot of sense in that regard. But do keep in mind the value of BW is historical data. So you would have to keep that in S4, at least in cold storage.
I'd suggest that there's a good add there too, where if we're thinking about an S4 implementation, you're typically not bringing historical data with you. So that history doesn't get brought over for you. So when you're implementing S4 and you're looking to be able to get that last 5-year financial view or last 5-year operational view, that's where the BW and or SAC can really sing, because you can bring that data in and merge it in. Whereas I would not encourage folks to try to figure out how to import historical financial data into S4 in a way that would fit, because that can get a little painful.
Yeah,
interesting. So, go ahead, Chris.
So one additional point, I don't want to necessarily call him out, but I saw Daniel Leal from Delta Faucet is attending the session today. And Delta Faucet actually uses a combination of S/4HANA. They're on 1610 currently and BW4. So there is definitely still time and place for BW. But like Sean said, you got to kind of figure out where you want your data to live. Use BW for the additional extended analytics and combination of the data and that semantic value. Don't try to put that into S4. Leave S4 pristine, clean for the operational data, and then figure out where everything else resides. And if it's BW, great. There's a time and place for it. Sometimes in native HANA as well. It really depends on what your flavor is or elsewhere. But you've got to kind of figure out where that data resides best and then build around it and use a tool like SAC on top of it to be able to consume and extend that easily.
Thank you, Chris. So I've been listening to this, and as a user, as a viewer here, I feel myself saying, hey, okay, well, there are a lot of things that I need to figure out, right? So, but can anyone share with me, and maybe this is for you, Chris, share with me a brief kind of comparison of which and what each tool is best for, what could be better. Do you have anything that you could show here, Steve, that might actually be worthwhile to help users along?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I have is just a kind of a video, so you have an idea of the functionalities of SAC. And I think what we can do is just kind of walk through this video and you'll get an idea of the possibilities of SAC. So it's a really easy interface to use. So I can use natural language and type in what are my top 5 customers. And this works with live data as well. I can add that to a screen. So you really don't need to be an expert. So any analyst can come along and do this. I can also go in and add some predictive nomenclature to this if I wanted to as well, or change this search. So I can go in and say, what is revenue? And it'll give me a numeric point. It's smart enough to pick out the chart type that I would want because I haven't specified a dimension. But as soon as I add in, a time, it'll turn to a line chart. If I add in a dimension like product, I'll add 2 line charts, right? So I can quickly add that in. And then from a predictive perspective, I might want to add in some description about what's going on. And this comes from our KXCN purchase that we did a few years ago. It's adding in predictive text that's explaining what's going on with sales. And it's going to tell me that sales are being driven by my high tech sector. Then I can click on that light bulb and get additional information. And then I can scroll through different visualizations that describe what's highly correlated with that. And I've been able to find that web server sales were impacting this. Finally, I can just do a forecast on my existing revenue. And unfortunately, it's going down. So this is all within a couple of clicks. So you don't have to be a data scientist to use a lot of these features in SAC. So more focused on the analyst than perhaps the task worker than what we've seen in with embedded analytics. But it certainly gives you an idea of what's possible in SAC and very tight integration with S4, but really it doesn't matter where that data comes from. Then within regard to, how do these two compare? If you look at kind of the embedded reporting piece, you're really focused on the S4 use case where SAP Analytics Cloud can do not only S4, can do non-SAP, multiple data sources. You can blend as well in the CDS view, but the end user can blend. So they can join Excel data in on the fly or Oracle and HANA data on the fly. Both support live connectivity. And then a little bit more visual capabilities in SAC. Now, embedded analytics has come a long way, but where SAC has some really neat capabilities is around natural language and that self-service persona. And then on the predictive front, we've embedded a bunch of stuff from our KXCN acquisition. So Smart Insights, which is basically correlation, Smart Discovery, which is essentially regression and classification, Smart Predict, has 3 algorithms associated with time series regression and classification. Both tools can bring in HANA, but a lot of capabilities there. Very similar personas on the consumption front. I won't talk too much about planning, but SAC has a planning persona, but both tools have a very similar consumption with Fiori, web, and mobile. Analytics Cloud also has an option of doing digital boardroom and embedding into our line of business applications like SuccessFactors, Ariba, Concur, Fieldglass, etc. But I'll just pause there to see if there's any questions on what you've seen there.
Any questions from the audience, specifically to the comparisons that Steve showed? Because I have one, Steve. Sure. For somebody trying to put things together, I mean, can that all be fit together pretty easily in a Fiori Launchpad, for example?
Yeah,
and all these things being brought together.
Yeah. So if you but if you saw what Sean did in his first demo, he had embedded analytics on a Fiori Launchpad, and then he had a different Fiori tile, and he jumped into SAC. You can also take, if you're on the cloud version of S/4HANA Cloud, it'll also take your security profile and variables and pass that over to Analytics Cloud, and Analytics Cloud can jump back on a transaction right where you are in S/4HANA, which is really cool. So some really tight integration there. It came on the cloud first. They're working on the on-prem version, but that's some great news for end users. So you can be in a report, jump to the transaction. If it doesn't look right, change the transaction, jump back to the report. Some nice capabilities there for end users.
Sean and others and Javier, what happens here when people are trying to bring all of these things together? From a practical standpoint, do you try to keep things separate? Or let the let the Analytics Cloud be the Analytics Cloud, or do you try to really kind of bring them together in the Launchpad?
I'll say it depends on the customer's UX strategy. So we have customers that prefer to have the Fiori Launchpad as their single entry point to all functionality. That will be most customers. But I've also seen customers that for some security restrictions or for some specific use cases, they prefer to keep them separate.
Sean, what's been your experience in implementation? Do you try to keep a single point of entry here, or do you allow SAC to, be its own place?
We've definitely seen very much the same thing. More consistently, that principle of coherence, of simplicity, tends to bubble to the top in terms of how do you make it easy to get in? How do you make it easy to do something? How do you make it easy to find what you're looking for? And if you put things all in one place, then it's easier for somebody to find. So, I mean, from our example, we've got our Fiori Launchpad that has links into Office 365, and it's got links into a couple of the other tools that we use. And you can move from either Office 365, and there's a link into Fiori, into your Launchpad, and then you can move from your Fiori Launchpad into your Outlook email, or into SharePoint, or into some of these other, into SAC. But trying to not just think about necessarily where a single place to start is, but how do you weave them together? Because if you're in your Fiori Launchpad, you want to get into SAC, and then you want to get back to where you were. And maybe you need to go and get into a SharePoint folder to look at some files or something else, and then you want to get back. And so making it easy to both get there and get home again, wherever home is, because depending on how much you use SAP, that might not be home for that user. But when they get there, it needs to be easy.
Yeah. Understood. All right, let's go ahead and switch to some of the audience questions, and there's some quite detailed ones here. So for the audience, please forgive us if we're not necessarily, pardon me?
Very detailed, very good questions.
Yeah, so maybe, all right, Chris, since you're there and you see one that you recognize that you might want to tackle with a little detail for us neophytes, you might want to answer it directly if you could.
Well, there's a couple of them, I think. I'll probably start it, but I then hand off to Steve and probably to Javier. One of the questions was around the SAP Analytics Cloud, and you have to bring all the data into the cloud, and that's a resounding no. You can leave a lot of the data with the live connectivity right where it's at, and don't have to bring it into the cloud. And I don't know, Steve, if you want to get into a bit more of a technical explanation on that, but I want to make sure that piece was clear.
Yeah, that's a great point, Chris. So live connectivity uses a technology called cross-origin resource sharing. And essentially what it does is it ensures that the data stays behind the firewall. So it doesn't leave, it doesn't leave your basically your server room. And it's pretty easy to set up. So once you set up your cloud connector, that's part of it. So it's actually the preferred way to connect to S4. And what we're doing now is a lot of those smart features like Smart Insight, Smart Predict, they actually work on live data. We're still working on Smart Discovery, but the big one was Smart Predict. We can actually do a prediction live on live data without that data going back through the firewall, and actually write it back to HANA as well. So there's some really neat capabilities within SAC for that. So no, you don't need to move that data to the cloud.
Steve, you mentioned that Smart Discovery, you're working on it. Do you know when it will be available on live data sets?
The way we do our roadmap, if it's in, we do quarters, and so if I look at it in a logical way, it's suggesting Q4. So Smart Insights went into beta in Q2. Smart Predict was live as of Tech Ed last year. Natural language is already supported on live. So a lot of those have already been done, and Smart Discovery is the big one that's left. If I look at the roadmap and be logical about it, it looks like a Q4 release. So assuming we all will travel one day again and go to Tech Ed, it would be possible announcement at Tech Ed. But of course, the roadmap caveats would apply here.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
so is everyone, go ahead, Chris.
There was one additional question. This is probably one for Javier, but I can maybe start. There's one I was kind of intrigued on, and I didn't know the answer. Can we embed business objects reports into Fiori at all from a UI5 standpoint? And I know, for clarity, I know we can do it in SAC. That's something I'm sure Steve can talk to in terms of building stories off of the BI or semantic layer, but I'm not sure if we can embed them in Fiori as well.
We can, Chris. So there's a call that's called open document. So you would just do an open document, and you can decide if it's in that browser or a new window. And that's a very mature technology. So if you Google search open document, you will be inundated with information. So it's very mature, and it's so, you know, and this was a very common deployment on Wall Street, where there'd be Java applications and they'd have a business objects window where a Crystal or Webby report would be running. You can also embed a analysis office page in Fiori too, which is, you know, a lot of finance users would like. So if you're doing a trial balance, you can actually have the trial balance ready there in analysis for office. And that's available either through business objects or through SAC, an SAC license. But great question.
And there is another BW related one. So BW seems like to be an interesting topic in this whole context, obviously, as well. So if BWs for historic reports and embedded analytics for future reports, is that actually a feasible combination? Does that actually make sense to separate the two?
Well, I think of it more sort of as task worker versus the analyst. So someone who needs to run a Dunning report really just cares about current data. Someone interested in the history of Dunning and wants to put together a forecast on, you know, maybe company X takes 45 days to pay its bill, looking back over 10 years, and company Y takes 20 days, you know, from a cash flow perspective, right? So it's more sort of a role perspective from the way I look at it. I'm curious to see what others think. But for that task worker in the moment, I need to run a Dunning report versus the analyst who wants historical data to go back in time and maybe bring in Excel data and stuff like that. It's a slightly different paradigm.
Yeah, I agree with that view. I mean, I also think that embedded analytics should be used for daily operational reporting. If you want additional insights, you probably need another solution. But
operational reporting was the word I was looking for. Thank you, Javier. I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. There's the who's going to use it, and the power user is probably the person that's going to be asked to go back and look 10 years. And if we're thinking about the what you want to have on your phone, what do you want to see quickly? That's where I see the embedded analytics singing. If you've gone, for instance, and you've done your system conversion, and you've got your 20 years of ECC data, and you've brought that with you, and now you're on S4, then you've got a little more runway. But if you've gone, for instance, greenfield, or you're net new to SAP, then you don't have that tail of information in the same system. And that's where bringing a BW SAC kind of thing into the mix can really make a big difference. And then you've got a smaller subset of people who are going to be fielding those questions too, and they're going to be more comfortable wrangling some of the data.
You know, there's a load of questions here, folks, and with the level of detail, I'm afraid I'm going to mash up some of them. But you know, there certainly is a question from Amola on SAC licensing and digital boardroom and analytics. I'm not sure if somebody can answer that real quick, whether that's included or not, or is that priced separately? Any answer to that?
Yeah, so digital boardroom is separate. It's a very affordable license, mind you, but SAC licensing is either a named user or a concurrent session. And then you would pay for a deployment of digital boardroom, but it's not an expensive license.
Okay. Another one here was I don't know if we could actually answer this. Is there somebody that we could direct him to? So he's within the rig. So maybe this is something that Javier, you can help get connected to. We'll take these offline.
Keith, I was just going to suggest something on using SDI to bring in non-SAP data and then chew on that as part of the embedded analytics. It's an interesting, it's a really interesting topic, and we've come across this a few times. Doing that within S4, you end up with enterprise licensing for HANA and a few things like that. So there's some licensing things to take care of as opposed to the runtime license. And as Javi indicated, there's some key differences around licensing and a few things like that. So I think the idea of how to bring that together is a good thought in terms of bringing it together with things that you've already got. I would take care around using an ABAP CDS. I think you're going to have to go lower than that. I think you're going to have to get into the database. And then from there, you'll be able to start to bring information together in a way that you can start to present it. But just as I think if you're trying to do things in a frugal innovation kind of sense, then I think it's an avenue to explore. Watch your licensing and take care on technically ABAP CDS doesn't go quite deep enough as Happy indicated.
All right, so we're getting kind of close to the end here, folks. So what I'm going to do is take an opportunity here for the audience to paste a link to a CEI that we're starting. I think it's open for a few more weeks around the Fiori implementation journey. There is, we are, as Javier was mentioning, trying to better understand the types of resources that we can provide you, some guideposts and things like that about how to do better SAP Fiori implementations, inclusive of where and how to integrate SAP Analytics Cloud. You can go ahead and click on that link in the future and take advantage of it by giving us your feedback. I think in terms of the open questions, we're going to table them, try and have them answered back to you in some format. There's no guarantees we're going to be able to do everything completely, but I think we're, as we have listened here today, there's many different tools to address, similar problems, and picking the right ones is critical for your business, right? And I think this is, the learning for everyone to be involved in. We can't boil the ocean and do everything at once, right? And so those incremental successes that you could build on are key to to a broader success story. I'm also going to bring up the poll for next week's topics. And so, yeah, here's the Mentimeter results as people type in their questions here. Eugen, I'll leave it to you to kind of close things up.
So, so we're coming to the end of this session, and as usual, we will actually share what's up next week. So next week, we actually planned a panel of experts on discussing of how actually design thinking is changing in the new reality and how to actually take it into the virtual environment. And for that, we will actually have a few folks from the SAP App House network join us. It's a great overview of what our partners are actually doing with the App House concept. We have quite a few partners all around the world, including Sean. I know you're also one of them. Who runs an App House style. And for that, we actually want to share like how design thinking is being done, so to say, like in the new reality. Very interesting conversation. We are very much looking forward to it as well. And if you want any of the previous sessions and you have missed them and you want to actually watch them, we have recordings live on YouTube. And you can see all the material also on our tiny URL link with tinyurl.com/SAP-Fiori-side-chat. You get the agenda for the next week's meeting, including all the login information that is required for the Zoom calls. Keith, do you want to share a little bit of the Mentimeter results?
Let's go ahead and close with this. So we had some of the suggestions here of evaluating chatbots within Fiori and Fiori and third-party tools, and SAC within Fiori applications, which sounds like a great one. There are some great suggestions that we're going to take back in-house, but in the interest of time, I want to be the first to thank Sean, Javier, Steve, and Chris for a really interesting and interactive conversation to a topic that I think so many customers are interested in learning more on. So, with all of that, thank you again for spending your time with us. And Eugen, I'll leave it to you to close up.
Yeah. So again, also from my side, thank you very much to the panel. Amazing discussion. I think was very, very insightful. Thanks for sharing. And I look forward to having you all back in one of our future sessions.